lives, and that basically have taken the souls out of people, not just taking out people out of their homes, and that ended the way of life, that basically ended the lives of the people. And you see it in every sense of the word when you go to 1948. And you see Palestinian houses. Once we were walking in Jaffa, and we saw a group of old men and women, but they were acting actually very funny. They must have been in their 80s and 90s, but they were running around like children. And we just sat there and watching them, trying to figure out what they're doing. And eventually we went and we asked them, because they were literally acting as if they were like 5-6-year-olds, the men and the women. And they were Palestinians, of course, and they were talking to each other in Arabic. They said, you know, we come from here, it's the first time we visited. And they didn't realize what they were doing, actually, but they were playing as children. And they couldn't see themselves, but we could see them as outsiders. And that was fascinating to see them reliving their lives, that they have been, the lives that were taken away from them. In a way, I think the way we relate to 1948 is very different from the survivors. I see my grandmother, who is from 1948, when she goes and she visits, she's talking about her parents, her siblings, her life when she lived there. And she makes sure that we understand everything about the life that they lived. And this is where Israel actually goes wrong, in the sense that for these Palestinians it was trauma. For the ones who experienced 1948, for the ones who came after, it is trauma, but we went beyond it. And we went beyond it in the sense that, what should we do about this trauma? And that what Israel actually was hoping will not happen. You know, that we will basically forget, we will be burdened by the oppression and then give up. But the opposite happened. The coming generations have internalized the trauma that exists within us in every sense of the word, but we have, in a way, not overcome it, but we're dealing with it in the sense that having that history and having that dispossession and oppression, then how do we challenge it? How do we struggle against it? And that by itself is Israel's biggest failure, I think, and that's where the hope lies.
Yeah, I think there's indeed a generational issue here, and how our parents or grandmothers and fathers actually relate to the Nakba and how we see it. So indeed, they were traumatized. They actually physically gone through that horrific period of time where they had just to leave or to move or to hide, or but in one night where they were dispossessed and they didn't anymore own their houses, or they can't see their families. So I mean, I do share the same story of my father not wanting to tell anything. All I know about it is that they actually left to Syria, but somehow he didn't find his sister, so he ended up going back. That's more or less what he was willing to say. But I think it's and after that, say the Palestinians who remained in Israel, they lived under military rule, which is very few people know about. By the way, they lived from 1948 until the 1966 under military rule. So if you wanted to travel from a town that is only 10 kilometers away, you had to have a permission from the military. If you wanted to work, if you wanted to go to the hospital, and no political activism was allowed. You were not allowed to protest, no, even not form movements, not form any political parties. So, I mean, for we are talking about 30 years almost. People were terrified. It's a new regime. They don't speak its language. They all the time spoken only Arabic, and it's different than the British mandate that was in Palestine. But the British mandate was not actually regulating and controlling every aspect of their life. And now all of a sudden there is this regime that they do not speak its language, they do not understand what's going on, and they need permission for everything. And also, from an amount of, say, around 1 million Palestinians who used to live in Israel, or who used to live in 48 that became later on Israel, they're now like a very tiny, small minority. We're talking about 100 to 150,000. It's after the destruction of 500 villages. So they were very terrified, and politics was not, they were not about to engage in any form of politicizing, and that's why their identity may be, I mean, they kept on nourishing